So, the right-wing talking heads conservatives put into power now want to cancel anime, manga, and video games. Whoever could have seen that coming? In recent weeks, far-right commentators decided to try to cancel anime, manga, and video games because they think it's childish, foreign, and only loved by Geppettos. This has been popping off for a while, but it seemed to get the most attention when two grifting douchebags got into a Twitter spat over it. Now, I don't care about Quarter Pounder or the wannabe pederast. However, the quartering does have a point that many on the right enjoy manga, anime, and video games, and the mediums are very popular in general, so people like Matt Walsh labeling anyone who doesn't like them losers and groomers won't win anybody over. Of course, Matt Walsh doesn't care about that because he's an ideological bully and a fool, and you never argue with fools. You're wasting your time. Walsh doesn't care about your argument. All he's going to do is make fun of you for defending it. You don't argue with fools. You embarrass them. Matt Walsh is over here calling anime and manga childish. It's like, dude, you read a 2,000-year-old book of fairy tales and believe they're true. Many believers won't like that, but that is the easiest way to shut down fools like Matt Walsh. And you're going to have to get good at doing that, because these are the people you put into power. Whoever could have known that if you put hyper-partisan, uber-religious ideologues in power, that they become authoritarian douchebags? If only someone, just some guy, had warned people that if the political pendulum swung too far to the left, it would swing back even further to the right, and that shouldn't be allowed to happen because it would lead to the very censorious nonsense we're seeing now. If only there was some evidence that anyone could show proving this would happen. Say, like a century's worth of history showing how right-wing conservatives led every single major attempt at censoring content, from books to music to films to video games. Oh, wait. Conservatives were quick to tell me I was living in the past. Now they're complaining that the people they put into power are coming after the things they like, using the same tactics they used against the left. The more ironic part, though, is the reaction from former lefties who spent years criticizing the right. They too have been caught unaware by the thing they already knew the right does. Enter V.
I didn't expect to make another video on this topic, but it seems that it's developing and it's becoming far more significant than I initially thought, with talking heads from all sides of the right-wing spectrum weighing in. And I guess the debate is, on one hand, you have certain internet users that are saying anime and video games are harmful and they should be banned, restricted from children. And on the other hand, you have the people that are saying, no, this is not the way.
Yeah, and that was a completely predictable response. You put right-wing ideologues back into power. These people have a well-documented history of acting this way. What did you think would happen? It seems like many of the anti-SJW critics who turned conservative memory hold their own experiences. They conveniently forgot that conservatives are the original moral busybodies, especially the Christian right. And once you give these people power, they will destroy anything and everything that doesn't fit their political and religious views. I don't know how anyone could forget that, but here we are. So V, like many conservatives who also like geeky things, is finding out the hard way that the people he supports don't share his values.
I suppose Sargon is making here an interesting comment, saying that the right must reject fly fishing. It is a vanity sport in which men sink countless unproductive hours, which should be spent saving the West and promoting conservative values. Instead, your lifestyle should be subsumed into a permanent ideological regime of conservatism. So, obviously, it's a sarcastic tweet. He is making fun of the fact that you can literally pick any hobby that humans are doing and find justification why it's a waste of time and people shouldn't engage in it. Because at the end of the day, if something doesn't produce money, then it shouldn't exist, right?
Yeah, that's a stupid argument, but it is the logical conclusion to the conservative perspective. Obviously, people can monetize things like fishing, gaming, art, music, what have you. But from the conservative perspective, these things are useless because they have no obvious value. Jordan Peterson talks about this.
The conservatives really have a problem with this in particular because conservative people tend not to be that creative. And it's a mystery by temperament. It's a mystery to me because they should be concerned with economic development, and beauty is so unbelievably crucial to economic development that it just yells out at you, you know.
I quoted Peterson because I know some right-wingers will get pissy about my comment, so I'm quoting someone I know they agree with to prove that it's not just my observation. But even in Peterson's explanation, he's focusing on the right's fixation with money. You should like creativity because beautiful things can make money, not you should like creativity because of the beauty it brings to the world. Another way of putting it is that, from the conservative perspective, entertainment needs to be justified. You can't engage in it just because you enjoy it.
And obviously, no ideology that has this is going to win a lot of support because people do need entertainment. Nobody believes that people should be working from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to sleep, until they die.
Somebody does. In fact, a lot of somebodies do, which is why there's an entire political movement, conservatism, built around it. Of course, that political movement isn't very popular with creative-minded people, for obvious reasons. It's almost like it's a bad idea to reduce people to nothing more than automatons to maintain the system. It's also the death of creativity. No creative person can function in that kind of environment, which is why historically most artists moved to places where they could do what they wanted. And if that wasn't an option, they became masters of subtlety and hidden messages so they could express themselves. If they were found out, though, they would be punished, because that's what restrictive societies do, including the one that creative people tend to like that starts with an S.
So entertainment is essential. The left has figured this out. They actually say that politics is downstream from culture. So they are trying to co-opt entertainment.
No, the left isn't trying to co-opt entertainment. Most creative people tend to lean to the left. As Jordan Peterson says,
You know, there are lots of people who are, in some sense, blind to beauty. It's actually one of the things that distinguishes, strangely enough, it distinguishes conservatives and liberals, roughly speaking, because liberal people tend to be high in openness. They tend to be creative, but they're low in trait conscientiousness, so they're not very dutiful. They're not particularly orderly. They're not particularly industrious. Conservatives are high in conscientiousness, especially orderliness, and they're low in openness. And I think the reason for that, in part, is that it's not that easy to be creative if you're too industrious or orderly.
creative people tend to be more open-minded, mostly because it's a function of how creativity works. You ask questions, think in the abstract, try new concepts, seek out what's different, and take risks. Conservative-minded people tend to be risk-averse, very literal, and want to maintain things as they are. They also tend to be less interested in and welcoming of new and different things, ideas, and people. Obviously, that doesn't mean conservatives can't be creative. It just means that most creative people tend to be left-leaning, so entertainment will reflect those views. Now, when people say politics are downstream from culture, I disagree. Just because something appears in entertainment doesn't mean that's what people support on a cultural level. The film industry is proof of this. Hollywood is very left-leaning, but historically they had to play to the right to survive, so their films look conservative or neutral, at least at first glance. Some filmmakers were clever enough to bury liberal and progressive messages in their work, but even as the culture became more tolerant of those views, the film industry remained outwardly neutral for far longer. What happened was that society changed, and that allowed Hollywood to make more overtly left-leaning stories with lesser fear of getting canceled. However, that's not really what V's talking about. What he's talking about is propaganda, trying to change people's minds through overt and covert manipulation. That can be effective if the person is good at it and it's reinforced by the general society. But most people aren't good at it, so it's usually obvious what they're doing, and chances are there won't be much social reinforcement of those views, so it either won't work or will take so long to work that you could barely claim it had an impact.
This is why they hate someone like Eric July far more than they hate someone like Ben Shapiro, because they understand that entertainment can be used as a vector in order to push your ideology on people when they don't suspect it.
Well, that was an unfortunate choice of words. I thought the whole point of Young Ripa's comic was to tell an interesting story, not promote right-wing propaganda. I love these kinds of unforced errors because they're so revealing. It shows that this current culture war isn't a fight over entertainment. It's about indoctrination, about converting people to your political side. That's been the right's MO since time immemorial, and progressives have tried this for the last few years, and they've both mostly failed. Why? Because people aren't watching shows, reading books, or playing games for politics. They want to be entertained, not converted. If indoctrination is the right's goal, they will fail. Not just because people can see through it, but because they aren't offering anything people want. Telling people what they can't do, what they can't say, who they can't be, and how they can't live isn't a good selling point. Don't take my word for it. Just ask the world's most popular political group, feminists.
For example, I got far more conservative values by watching Naruto than going to church, as I mentioned in the previous stream.
I've read Naruto cover to cover 4 times. I've never walked away thinking it was a conservative manifesto. I don't even know how you could think that, since the entire series is built around the characters bucking tradition and the status quo, both of which are keystones to conservatism. We're shown time and time again that maintaining tradition and the status quo is the cause for most of the problems in that world. The Third Ninja War is a direct result of this. Naruto himself is a result of this. He's an outcast because he has a demon placed in him as a baby. He didn't ask for this, and all the adults in the village know this, but they still treat him like garbage. He's done nothing to deserve this, but because of who he is, because he is different, they hate him. As a result, their kids hate him, not because they know what he is, but just because they're copying their parents. And Naruto isn't the only character like this. There's Rock Lee, Neji, Gaara, Haku, all of them treated like pariah because they don't fit into the traditional norms of their society. If we applied these stories to the real world, the metaphors would write themselves, from the treatment of minorities to women to gay and trans people to different religions, and conservatism wouldn't come out looking like the hero. So what values are you talking about? Are you talking about friendship, family, and perseverance? Because none of these are exclusively conservative values. I'm also sure that Masashi Kishimoto wasn't trying to comment on Western politics in his very Japanese story. If you're claiming that Naruto is some grand affirmation of conservatism, I'm gonna need some receipts.
But there are other types of anime that reflect American conservative values far better than the American media itself. My Hero Academia, for example, is a really nice anime which teaches children the value of friendship, the fact that people can be redeemed, like Endeavor. He's a really nasty piece of work in the beginning of the anime, but then he manages to redeem itself. Teaches the concept of hard work.
What are you talking about? Neither of those are exclusively conservative values, and the second one, redemption, is a thing conservatives claim they believe but never practice. You don't have to take my word for it. Go and look up how conservatives react whenever anyone shows the tiniest amount of pity for criminals. You'll find thousands of the most hateful statements you can imagine just because someone viewed a criminal as a human being. By the way, Endeavor abused his wife and son. If he were a real person, the right wouldn't find him redeemable unless his name was Steven Crowder or he tried to burn the gay out of Todoroki.
Like, Deku doesn't get his superpowers overnight, he actually has to work for them.
That's not what happens at all. Deku doesn't work hard to get his powers. He's given his quirk by All Might, and not because Deku worked hard for it, but because of his character. Midoriya has no quirk, so society views him as an outcast. He wants to be a hero, but society only allows those with quirks to be heroes, making him a bigger outcast. Still, he learns everything he can in hopes he'll eventually develop powers, which he never does, making him an even bigger outcast and a target for bullies like Bakugo. When Deku tells All Might of his dream of becoming a hero, All Might basically says, "Don't try because you can't." And that almost breaks Deku. But when Bakugo gets attacked, Deku runs to save him. He does it without a second thought, and not because he's going to get anything out of it or because he's proven he's a better person. No, he does it simply because it looked like Bakugo needed saving. The idea of helping people who can't help themselves, let alone risking your life to save your bully just because it's the right thing to do, is the antithesis of conservative values. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go and listen to what conservatives say whenever anyone suggests actually doing this for real. It's not exactly the most positive response. It's only after this that All Might gives Deku his quirk, and it's not Deku's hard work that earns it. It's Deku's nature. It's that he's a genuinely good person who wants to help people without wanting anything in return, simply because it's the right thing to do. That is what makes him worthy. I don't know how you watched that show and walked away thinking it was anything else. Maybe you were confusing it with One Punch Man. I don't know. Watch it again, cause you are wrong, son.
So going back to the question, like, why is it that it's important to not dismiss entertainment and actually try to embrace it and produce your own works of art? This is what Razor Fist constantly says, right? Like, you shouldn't just complain about the entertainment. If you're a right-wing person that has money, you should start creating actively the type of entertainment that you want to see. And the reason that this is important is that the left has figured out accurately that politics is downstream from culture.
I agree that if there's a story you want to see and no one makes it, then you should make it yourself. There's an audience for everything, and if you can find a big enough group willing to support you, you can be successful even if it's a niche audience. However, if you're making these stories just to try to convert people to your political side, you will fail. And here's why.
Like, I have seen people that I talk with that are left-leaning who actually agree with many of the policies that right-wingers have, but will never vote for them because of cultural issues.
And you're surprised by this. Why? Of course, left-leaning people won't vote conservative. Why would they vote for people who hate them? Think about it. When's the last time you heard conservatives say anything positive about left-leaning people? All the right's commentary about anyone left of center is that they're all inhuman, amoral, baby-eating Geppettos. So why would any lefty vote for them? Because you like anime titty too? Everybody likes a little bit of titty. That's not a reason to vote against your interests, your values, or yourself.
Culture is very important. This is why the left hates someone like Eric July far, far more than they hate someone like Ben Shapiro. This is why someone like Kanye West was such a huge deal for them, but other talking heads on the far right didn't even register on the radar. It's because they understand the power of culture. They understand the power of entertainment. This is why they're freaking out.
Nah. The reason comic book pros lost their minds over Eric July is because he made more money on one book than most of them will make in their lifetimes with all their books combined. They're just jealous that he has an audience who will actually buy his books. That's it. I know you want it to be more complicated. It isn't. With Kanye, the first problem was him embracing Trump because TDS was strong with the left at the time. The second problem was when he buddied up to the funny mustache man, which oddly enough brought him more right-wing support. There's a genuine concern to be had when you have a popular figure supporting a genocidal, racist, totalitarian regime. We've already seen what they do when they get power. You don't let them get it again. But I have a question. What do you think is going to happen if left-leaning people see this stuff? Do you think minorities who like Kanye will start singing the praises of the dictator just because Ye said so? You think lefty comic book fans will start shouting, "Fuck them hoe-ass roads," because they read a comic book?
Another interesting take that I firmly disagree with is the idea that, well, kids shouldn't play video games. They should go outside. And, I guess, as the joke goes, it depends on the child, right? Because if you happen to be in LA, I don't think you want to go outside. And I'm saying this as a person who grew up in a colorful neighborhood, as people on the left at the time said it contained individuals from all walks of life. And I was the kid that played video games all day. I was sitting at home playing video games, engaging in questionable websites at the time, but I was staying home. Most of the friends that I grew up with are in jail now. So my point is that you shouldn't generalize. There should be parenting. I think that the parent knows best what's good for their child.
Really? Will that also apply to the parents who allow their kids to become such a menace that other kids can't play outside? Or how about the parents who think what's best is a good beating or a little bit of sex play? Because I have a feeling you don't like the decisions those parents made, even though you said they know what's best for their kids. Or could it be that every parent isn't a good parent, so you might want to rethink that dumbass argument?
But Sargon isn't the only one that joined the conversation. Zuby Music as well, and he's got 1.1 million followers, saying that the modern right is increasingly adopting the behavior, tactics, and rhetoric of the modern left, and is just off-putting and alienating to the average person. I would say that it's not necessarily the tactics of the modern left. I would say moral busybodies exist in every single ideology. Like, you're going to have radical people.
That's true, but as I said on Twitter, the right isn't adopting the left's behavior. They're just going back to their old ways. After all, who do you think the left learned it from? The right used these tactics for decades against people. Eventually, some of those people came into power. Some of them were bound to hold grudges, so when they got the chance to return the favor, they did, and it caught the right off guard. Why? Because it never crossed nary a conservative's mind that any bleeding heart liberal would treat them the way they treat other people. They thought the left was too soft for that. They were mistaken. And so were the far lefties who acted out their power fantasies. Why? Because it never crossed their minds that anyone would object to what they were doing. All of this was predictable, including what the right would do if they got power again. But now we've got right-wingers shocked that the original moral busybodies with authoritarian tendencies turned authoritarian and they gave them power. Why are you surprised that joyless twats like Matt Walsh hate anime and manga? He can't bone it, marry it, abort it, or pimp it out to his favorite priest. What use does he have for it? Did you really think you could spark a culture war battle, turn everyone against anything you called woke, and then expect them to make nuanced distinctions between the good stuff and the bad stuff when you're not doing that yourself? V, you were part of Gamergate. You watched this happen with feminists and their attacks on gamers. They spend so much time trashing gamers in mainstream media that normies just assumed all gamers were toxic. So when male feminists, when they weren't touching women without consent, whined about how they were being unfairly labeled as toxic when they were the good ones, it fell on deaf ears, and also turned out not to be true. It's the height of irony that the right's quickness to label everything bad and degenerate, including the things they like, resulted in their chosen talking heads turning on those very things.
Now you have like this thing where it's against anime, video games, and so on and so forth.
The irony is so thick you need a diamond-encrusted buster sword to cut it. The fact that manga and anime are popular in some right-wing circles, even though the establishment hates it, is hilarious, but not as funny as watching these people clutch their waifu pillows just to keep them out of Matt Walsh's hands. Just tell him the girl on the pillow is 18. He won't even look at it.
Unfortunately, the conversation can sometimes manifest itself, and you end up with the way American media looks today, which is due to the far left moralizing. Like, they came up and they said, well, no, like, this is too sexist, this is too racist, put us in charge. Give us money. And when they got in charge and they got money, then they started pushing their ideas, but they also started censoring what is and what isn't allowed to happen in art.
Yeah, this is exactly why you never give ideologues power, because they will abuse it. They will justify every act they do as some defense of decency or morality or social norms. At first, they'll target things most people don't like, and then work their way down until there's nothing you can read, hear, see, or say that doesn't fit their narrative. Again, the right spent decades doing this. I don't know why you're shocked to see them doing it again.
Right-wingers, like Ethan Van Sciver, like Zuby, like many others who are producing culture, in my opinion, should be praised, because even if they do not push right-wing value in the content that they are producing, the very fact that the content they are producing is entertaining and not just woke is a good thing.
Well, it's only a good thing if it appeals to people outside of their political group. If the only people who consume their content are people politically aligned with them, then they're not making any headway because they've just created an echo chamber. That's a major problem for right-wing creators. Does your work have actual appeal outside of right-wing circles? This is what happened with Eric July. Eric walked away with millions of dollars from one book, but the only people who seemed to buy it were right of center. Part of that is because the left-leaning comic book media wouldn't cover the book other than to attack Eric. Part of that is his audience is mostly right-leaning. The other part is that all the right-wing coverage was specifically about winning the culture war and owning the libs. If the goal is to have broad appeal, you're not going to get it from just playing to the right. And if your goal is to own the libs, you will fail because that only works if they care about what you're doing, and after a while, they're going to stop caring. I've made this point for years to comic book pros. It's not just about the money. You can rake in billions of dollars in sales, but if all you want to do is stick it to your enemies and indoctrinate people into your politics, it's going to backfire because nobody is here for your politics. They just want to be entertained. That's not to say you can't write about politics. Films like The Matrix and books like Watchmen prove that wrong. You can talk about politics, but the story must come first, and it can't be about converting people to your side. No one's here to hear you preach. If you have a political point to make it. But don't try to indoctrinate people because they'll see it coming from light years away and they'll drop you faster than Crowder's balls on a man's shoulder. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.